Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am just happy because it's spring.
It is.
I've mowed lawn and
Oh, you have already, yeah.
twice.
Wow.
Yeah, mowed lawn twice. I love the smell, the aroma.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? Things popping up in your yard?
Yeah, I've just been astounded by how fast the peonies have been growing, especially. Yes. And great to see. But they're probably like the biggest changers. You know, just I put up the what do you call it? There's kind of a ring with squares on it that's got usually like three
awesome.
stills that poke on the ground.
Kind of a peony cage. I think those are kind of specially.
So it kind of looks like a grill on stilts. And yeah, you put that over and you let the peonies grow through it. But I'll tell you what, I did that. That worked great. I was at a garage sale this morning, just before we came to the studio now.
Did you find one?
I found two more, and then two hanging baskets with cocoa liners.
Nice.
So, you know, very much I'm going to have to get more plants to fill those.
I am impressed with those peony cages. Yeah, and exactly. It's that grid that you put on at the appropriate time when they're little. Then they grow up through that, and it supports the peony so that they don't fall apart. Yeah. I don't have any. Okay. I wish I did.
I think I've got one for you in the car.
I am in admiration. Have you noticed also the ornamental crab apples have just started? Yes, you know, both the white, the pink, rose-colored ones. And so, boy, these are good times.
They're really, shooting out. So it's really fun to see. Well, and so what we wanted to do today is we wanted to talk about the things that we're seeing out in the yard and the things that somebody could find at a garage sale, things like that. But instead, we're going to talk about this is kind of the favorite time of the year. This is maybe not quite Black Fridays like for some people, but this time of the year is really a good time. Before you start planting, obviously you need the plants. So where do you get the plants? You go to a garden center. So today we're going to talk about going to a garden center, the things to know, things to look for, how to go about your trip so that you kind of have the most productive trip you can.
Boy, and as you're talking, I'm imagining, I'm smelling the aroma of the greenhouses. You know, when you walk in, that pleasant humidity, the fragrance of the soil and the plants. And as you were describing it, I got to get to a garden center. I've been to one so far.
Okay.
But I mean, I don't just go to one, buy plants, and go home and plant. I mean, this is it's a month-long experience that we savor.
I think
so this is going to be a good topic.
Sam and I, our routine is basically go out to burn bombs maybe on Sunday or Saturday morning, have breakfast, and then we'll go to a garden center after that because we just need one or two more things. And of course, we come back with a flat full of plants.
Well, definitely. And I mean, excuse me, it's an experience. I mean, when I got to go buy a shirt, I go in, grab the shirt, get out as quick as I can. Yep. Not at a garden center. No. There's an experience to be savored here.
And it gets the wheels turning in your head too. That not only, you found the thing that you want, but hey, there's this thing. And
there's different plants, there's new plants.
There's new plants. But it's also like, well, what if we put in this? This is something that's faster growing behind this thing that's slower growing, that we could fill in an area that would be really nice. Lots of things.
Definitely. And have you noticed that there's a difference between garden centers? Obviously. Okay. There's the national chains. Okay, that's one experience. And I might encourage new gardeners, kind of new into the gardening field, don't just let the national chains be your garden center experience. Visit the locally owned, because that's a totally different experience, because the locally owned garden centers are those that tailor the plants to our area. They have the experience for answering questions. I mean, this is their business. They aren't selling hardware and washing machines and things like that. So do make sure that you experience the locally owned garden centers, because it is just a totally different experience. Yeah, and it's just so I really want to emphasize that.
Yeah, and there's probably a lot of reasons that we say at least try to go to a locally owned garden center, because the one thing there is a lot of time you will have people who have worked there for a while. They really do know their stuff. And similar to if you go to sometimes a big box hardware store, you'll ask for help. Sometimes you don't get the help you need. People don't really know. If you go to, my experience has been, at least with the locally owned places, they know where the plants are. They can offer you advice. They can tell you how that plant will grow, what that plant will need. I think just the level of awareness and expertise is
Definitely
higher at a
and
garden
sometimes
center.
cheap isn't always the best. Someday when we got a day and a half, I'll explain my experience with the apple tree that I bought because it was cheap versus that I bought at locally owned garden center that was more expensive. But 5 years later, I wished I had not devoted 5 years to that cheap apple tree because there's a huge difference. So yeah, it's going to be fun to talk about some tips today about when you go to the garden center, how to get a little more kind of mileage, a little better experience. And so I've enjoyed kind of presenting programs about this and talking about this experience. So it's going to be fun to share a few of those. Should we get right into it?
Yeah, let's pull up, as we say. Let's pull up.
To the garden
we're ready to shop.
But okay, there's a few things to do before we pull up to the garden center that are important. One of those is to do a little bit of planning. Okay, first of all, align your trunk with plastic or cardboard or something, because that really helps. When you come out of the garden center with your big shopping cart loaded with plants and you go to open your trunk and, oh my gosh, we got a whole bunch of stuff in there already. So then you got to get rid of that. So clear your trunk first. Make sure you got something lining it in case you don't want dirt in your trunk. I mean, I've still got last year's dirt on the bottom of my trunk, so I'm okay because I love to haul plants. And also, measure your pots and planters. You know, if you're going to buy things to fill up your outdoor planters, measure those. It's surprising. You think you're going to remember. And when you get to the garden center and decide, oh, shoot, does that planter take 3 plants or does that take 6 plants? If you have the dimension, the diameter of it, you know, is it a 12-inch? Is it 18-inch? Because that makes a big difference as to how many plants. And maybe, so measure them, write it down, take your tape measure along with you too. And that will help greatly. Garden centers are very happy to help you. But if you just kind of hold out your hands and say, well, how many plants do I need to plant in kind of a pot about this size? Well, they're going to be able to help you better if they know exactly that you're trying to motion a 16-inch pot versus a 12. And also, if you are going to do any landscaping, you know, if you've got a little area you want to fill or a big area, measure it first, the width and the length, because that will really help. When you get to the garden center, you're looking at shrubs. How big of a width does that shrub require? And if you don't have those dimensions in your head and you're kind of trying to describe to the garden center person, well, it's kind of from here to there and maybe about kind of this wide, but you probably are going to buy too much for it. So you can save a few dollars by kind of planning ahead and measuring that so that you're going to be able to buy just the right amount for that area. So a little bit of planning ahead really does help.
You know, along that lines, and it's something that I kind of encourage that I think we've talked about before. We've done a podcast on how to plan a garden. And I think one of the great things is to have kind of draw like a loose map. And if you could bring that in, because then you've got the measurements written out, but then also you can bring that up to a person that works there, somebody who's knowledgeable, and say, hey, I was thinking about this plant. How do you think that this would not just look there, but how's it going to grow and interact with those other plants? Because if they may be able to see something that like, oh, well, I see that that's on the corner of a house. Is there a downspout there? Is that area going to get a lot more moisture? This plant likes to be in a drier area or something like that.
You know, that's a great point because, for example, if a person is describing, okay, I want a shrub for the south side of my house, okay, you think south side, lots of sun, but if on the south side of the house you have a great big existing elm tree that's 50 years old that's shading everything on the south side, you might, instead of needing something for full sun, you might be needing something for shade or part shade. So yeah, going with kind of a map of your yard will really help you and any help that you're soliciting and choose something.
And if you can't do a map, try to bring in some photos of an area.
Oh man, yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
photos.
then that way they can see something that the shade of the tree, and maybe they would be able to see,
they may see something that you don't, or something that you take for granted.
Yeah.
That then a photo, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I always try to do that. And
great
think
idea.
about, because then while you're there again, you look and you look at the plant, you help you imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting too. It's fun when you go to garden center. It's fun if it's crowded, because you kind of get into the spirit of it. But man, Saturdays and Sundays and maybe even Friday afternoons are really, really busy.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a garden center like on a Sunday?
Oh, yeah. I was at one last Sunday. We had to park a ways away.
Spring, in May. Yeah, it is. You have to park. And that's fun. But especially if you're looking for a little bit of personal attention, if you're going to ask and need a little bit of attention as to what is going to plant best here. Most of the garden centers have, a certain number of employees, and they maybe can't make the rounds to everybody on a really, really busy day. So we need to be, mindful of that. And if you do want some, maybe some special attention, which they're happy to give, the garden centers, but maybe try for, Monday through Thursday.
Yeah.
Or an evening is good too.
I like going at evenings. I think that's a little bit more relaxed. Usually the sun's not directly out, so maybe it's a little cooler at that point of the day. But yeah,
many of the greenhouses too have aisles that aren't overly wide.
Yep.
And because they have to, they like to maximize the growing space in greenhouses, and so you don't want a lot of wasted space on aisles. But there's plenty of room for people to navigate down through. But the greenhouses can be really, really busy.
Yeah,
it's we used to love that time of year. But it would be interesting sometimes when you get down a greenhouse aisle. You know what I'm describing. You get down a greenhouse aisle and you can't always go forward, and so you need to back on out, and you're kind of trying to navigate your cart. And gardeners are great people. I've never seen anybody fighting in a garden center.
I haven't.
Or maybe over a plant. If it's the last plant. But anyway, people are patient in a garden center. But I do like to try to go if I can during the week.
I would say, based on some of my experience, and especially as we're recording this is the Friday before Mother's Day. This will be a busy weekend, we know, going in. The other thing is that over the weekends, they may not be able to restock as much. So by the time you get to Sunday, things may be a little picked over.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Monday too, I would say sometimes, they'll have trucks that come in, maybe earlier in the week. Maybe look at going like a Wednesday or a Thursday would be my suggestion. That those are some kind of good days that they may have been able to replenish their stock, get things out and back on the shelves.
That's a great point, because in our own garden center that we did the growing in kind of the back greenhouses and the sales in the front area. And so you would restock from the back greenhouses on up to the front. And sometimes on a busy Sunday afternoon, things might be a little, there might not be as many of a thing as there would have been.
Yeah,
earlier.
You're busy selling and not able to move
not
everything
always
up.
able to stock. So that's a good point too. It's interesting. We all have our favorite garden centers that we go to each year, each spring. And you kind of maybe make the rounds. If you live in an area that has more than one garden center, you make the rounds. But have you ever gone to a brand new garden center that you've never been to before?
Yes.
And it can be a little. Okay, you pull up to the garden center, brand new one, and it's kind of like, I got to figure out, okay, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Okay, when you go up to the garden center, are there boxes there, that they want me to put the plants in? Or are there trays, greenhouse plastic trays? Or do they want me to kind of look, is there one that's partly empty and they want me to set one plant off and use that tray? So when you pull up to the garden center, it's kind of fun to kind of see what their layout is. Okay, see what they want. Do they want you to take a cart, or do they have baskets? Do they have boxes there? So hopefully it's kind of evident what they want you to put these plants in. And so you kind of start there. And then I like to kind of see, how is it that their layout is? Do they have the annual flowers all in one spot? Usually they do. Are the perennials in a total separate? I have seen some garden centers where they kind of have them blended. I've bought a fern once that I thought was a hardy outdoor fern. It turned out to be a non-hardy indoor fern, but it was kind of mixed in.
Yeah.
So I mean, sometimes you kind of have to eye up where's the annuals, where's the perennials. Shade plants are oftentimes easy to identify because in the sales area, they'll usually be under shade cloth, is what the greenhouses call them. It's that kind of black, that allows a little air in but gives it some shading, kind of that shade cloth. So you can kind of identify what the shade plants are usually, and so you can kind of steer for that. So it's fun to go to a new garden center and kind of just take a minute or two to mentally see what's this all about? What do they want me to do? Kind of try to blend in, with the old experienced ones there. And so I enjoy going to a brand new garden center. But for a garden center that you've shopped at for decades, you know exactly. You go in, okay, the boxes are over there. Carts are going to over there, and you know exactly how to do it. But so it's fun.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break. When we come back, more with Getting to Know a Garden Center.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
All right, we're back and we're talking about how to get the most out of your trip to the garden center. I know a lot of people will be heading out to the garden centers for the first time here in the next couple of weeks before they get into their garden and do all their planting, plant their baskets, plant their gardens, plant everything. But we wanted to kind of give you a rundown with this show of how to kind of, when you're at a garden center, things to look for, how to kind of maneuver around there, maybe some questions to ask, maybe some things to bring with you. We talked earlier about, if possible, bring in a map, and even better, bring in photos of the area that you want to plant so that you can ask questions. You can ask very, very good questions that'll get good answers.
Yeah, exactly. And, one of the best silent sales people at the garden center is the plant tag.
Yeah.
The plant tag that was an awesome invention. That plant tag, if the garden center's busy, if you are there on a weekend and you're maybe looking around and maybe waiting for the salesperson to kind of get to you to help you choose some things, there's a lot of information on the plant tag itself. For example, annual flowers. It'll usually tell, sun versus shade, part sun, how tall, how wide, if it's suitable for a hang basket or if it grows more upright. But especially trees and shrubs and perennials. Man, that plant tag is so important.
Yeah.
For example, on a perennial, sun versus shade, but also how big it will get, because there's a big difference between like a peony and maybe a small perennial. And so the plant tag will tell that. But it is so important with shrubbery. And of course, I'm a good one to talk about some of these things because I've made every mistake.
Right.
So
we talked about this before. This is
when I've planted shrubs, they look so small and cute when you first get them home. And so I've planted landscapes in our own home where 20 years later, everything is too crowded. And if I would have read that plant tag a little closer, not only read it, but follow it, and I would have known that some of these creeping junipers can spread outward 10 feet, but instead, they looked small, and I planted them too close. And so a common mistake is to plant the things too close. But by religiously following the spread on them, you'll give them the right distance. And of course, gardening teaches patience. The first year, it may not look finished, but if it looks finished immediately, you've probably crowded these, plants too closely. And so important to look at that and really follow that, because those plant tags really do tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've rarely seen a plant tag that wasn't pretty accurate on the height and the width of it. And for example, a tree, a small decorative tree, sometimes get planted too close in front of like picture windows, like the front of your house. Have you ever seen where a decorative tree, maybe it's a flowering crabapple, gets planted right kind of square in front of the house, and pretty soon from the street you can't see the house because there's this big beautiful crabapple? Well, you're not going to cut it down, but it maybe would have been better if we read the plant tag and knew that was kind of low branched. Maybe it would have been better off to one side.
Yeah.
And on perennials, too, getting back to those, I love to read the plant tag because it will tell what season it blooms.
Yep.
So then I can say, oh, this is a spring bloomer. If it's something new that we aren't familiar with, oh, this is spring bloomer. So I can purchase plants that spring bloom, summer bloom, fall bloom, and extend. So yeah, I can't say enough about plant tags. They're wonderful.
It does. It helps so much because you may have an idea of what you want going in there, but you get there and then you read it and you think like, I would like this. But then you read it and you realize like, this is going to get 6 by 6. Right. In the area I have, that will be really, really crowded. And always think about that. Then we talk about this, that the biggest tool you can have as a gardener is patience. Right. Things will grow and things will continue to grow. So plan ahead, knowing that first year.
Yeah, I rarely hear people say, man, I planted this way too far apart. Usually it's the opposite. The other thing I love about plant tags is you can, after you plant, you can take that tag and put it either in a journal, slip it in a kind of a pocket in a folder, or just I don't always get that done, but I at least have them in a basket.
Yeah.
Okay, it's tempting to take that plant tag and put it right down at the base of the shrub, the perennial, whatever. But that plastic does disintegrate in the sun.
Yep.
Have you ever done that? Well, I've done that lots. Put the plant tag right down and after a year or so, it's broken, the name broke off. And I can't find the name. So instead, I've learned to take the tags, put them somewhere else in a basket or somewhere for a record.
Yep. And
then I use as permanent of a label as I can to put that by the perennial or the shrub for. Yeah, so I've learned to kind of make more of an archive of those tags instead of putting them right outdoors.
One of the big things that to look for on plant tags is the amount of light that it needs.
Oh, definitely.
But how do you break down what full sun, part sun, different things like that? Because we were just talking about shade plants, where to find shade plants. What about the sun and the shade? How much does a plant need for that?
Yeah, because sometimes you see the description, full sun, part shade, full shade. Well, what's the difference between part sun and part shade? Well, some of these are maybe, but if we start at the top, full sun means it's going to get all day sunshine. The sun is going to be on that plant all day. On the opposite end, full shade means it's not going to get much sunlight at all. Maybe just a couple hours. In the morning, maybe you get a little angled sunshine coming in, less than 2 hours. So we got full sun, the opposite, full shade. Then in between is part sun, is about 4 to 6 hours of sun. Sometimes you have to go out in your yard and kind of just look and observe. Maybe on a weekend when you got some time off, you're working around out in the yard, kind of look and see, okay, so part sun is like 4 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. Part shade is, of course, less than that. Part shade would be 2 to 4 hours.
Okay.
So the main thing is you determine, okay, it's full sun or full shade, and then the in-between things. I love the in-between, part sun, part shade. And of course, part sun gets more than sun, than part shade. But I like that for some things, such as some of the hydrangeas that are so popular. Some of those love that part sun. They'd rather have the shade in the hot afternoon. And so I love sun and part sun. And of course, then I love things that really love and thrive the shade. I love putting those in the shade. As long as we're talking about the labels and tags too, tomato plants. When we're shopping tomato plants, it's very important to look at that number of days. And so if it says 70 days. We can't set our calendar to that and say, oh, I'm going to plant this tomato on the calendar. I'm going to count off 70 days and I better have a ripe tomato. So much depends on the heat, the growing conditions as to whether that's going to truly give you a tomato in 70 days. But those days on tomatoes categorize the tomato types into early, mid-season, or late. So it is kind of important. So just a couple of easy ways to remember that. If it's maybe listed at less than 60 days, then it's considered early. And it's fun to have some early tomatoes. So 60 days less. If it's around 70 days, 70 to 75 days, those are our workhorse tomatoes. Those are the good main season. They're going to give you lots of tomatoes for salsa, canning, slicing. So about the 70 days. If you're getting 80 to 90 days or even 100 days, those are quite late. And it's fun to have some of those too. But if you planted only 90-day tomatoes, you're going to be waiting for your tomatoes while everybody else is enjoying some. So 60 days are early, 70, 72 days, the 70-ish days, those are the workhorse ones. 80 to 90 are kind of late.
Yeah, and then you're bumping up against maybe if you have an early frost.
Yeah, definitely.
If you have an early September
lots
frost.
Lots of green tomatoes.
Yeah.
Lots of green tomatoes when frost is coming and maybe not a whole lot of ripe ones.
One of the other things to look for on tags, kind of another important thing in addition to sun, obviously is the big one, but zone hardiness.
Oh, definitely.
And talk a little bit about that. So what is our zone? We are 4A?
Yeah, we're zone 4A. Oftentimes they don't add the A in. I wish they did.
Yeah.
But generally, okay, so the way it goes is 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 is way up by the Arctic Circle. Yep. So anything listed as 4 or 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1 are really rock solid. So I love zone 3 type stuff. So even if we have a winter that's cold, very cold, 3, 2, I don't think I've seen anything listed as zone 1 maybe. But zone 3 and 2, wonderful. Lilacs, for example. Lilacs, rhubarb are all, zone 3. But zone 4, we warmed up a bit.
Yep.
So zone 4 for most of North Dakota and Minnesota. So very important to select that.
Although I would say, that like you said, most of Minnesota, but I think down in the cities is a different zone, isn't it? Or is it slightly warmer there?
Slightly warmer there.
They are further south. And so that if you buy plants down there, they may not work up here.
Yeah, exactly. Because sometimes you think, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that's still Minnesota. It's all cold. But no, the farther south you go, it is more mild.
Yeah.
In fact, I've seen some projected maps, and it's not going to be too many more years until southern Minnesota, that area is going to be in zone 5.
Really?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Maybe if I garden long enough, I wonder if we'll ever be in zone 5. Do you think camellias?
That would be
camellias and some of the deep south things. I don't think so. But yeah, you're bringing up the hardiness zone. Very important for perennials, trees, and shrubs.
How about like when you're looking at plants, what to look for?
Yeah, how do you know a good
when
one?
you look for it? Because we've talked a little bit about like, you look and you see something that's flowering, it looks great. Are those the ones you should get? What things should you look for?
Yeah, when we had a garden center, I kind of enjoyed it. People would sometimes say, well, just pick me out some good ones. Okay, so here's what we would look for when picking out some good ones. For example, tomato plants. Look for plants to have a good, rich green color because that means they've been well fertilized, good nutrition. If they're a little yellowish, it means they've started to run out of nitrogen or other elements. So both tomato plants as well as any bedding plants, look for just a good grass green, rich color. And so that's a good indication. And also nice, stocky, well-branched plants, something that's not leggy. Well-branched plants means that in greenhouse they were maybe kind of pinched back or cut back to encourage branching. And so now color cells.
Yeah.
Color cells, it gives you the chance to see what exact color is this. So I do by color, so if petunias are blooming, if marigolds are blooming, that tells me what it is. But as soon as I get those home, I cut off the blossoms, as we mentioned, in our planting episode. But I do cut those off. Same with, and the reason for that is the strength goes into the plant.
Yep.
You'll get more show very quickly by getting rid of those
and
first
you're not
few
taking
blossoms.
off the leaves, so it's still gathering in all that energy through the leaves.
Exactly. Yep. You're
The
just getting rid of
flowers.
those first few little kind of somewhat wimpy blossoms, maybe. And on perennial flowers, I mean, it's very nice when that pot of perennials has a bit of a flower on. That shows you kind of what you're going to get. But so that's fine. But as soon as you get that home and plant it, you cut off that blossom because we're in it for the long run. More of that strength is going to go into the plant. But it's fine if they're blooming in the garden center. Now, geraniums are a different case. So in looking for a geranium, good grass green color, hopefully not too many yellow leaves on the lower part. And also good stocky geraniums, well branched, as many kind of flower stems. Now, greenhouses have groomed geraniums. They've done all the pinching. They've removed the early blossoms for you, so there's no need to take a nice, beautiful blooming geranium and remove the blossoms. No, they've done that for you in the greenhouses a long time ago. And so when I was picking out geraniums for people, I would just look for as many buds, coming, some nice blossoms, especially if you want it for cemetery, Mother's Day, or other type planting, open blossoms, but also check and see what's coming up. Make sure it's got some good blossoms coming up on it. And so that's usually what I would look for. On perennial flowers, when I'm shopping for perennial flowers, one thing that I look for, I look at the pot and see if there's kind of little multiple plants coming from that crown area, the area between the stems and the roots, that crown area. If I can see in a pot maybe 3 little plants, I can take those home and I can divide that, and I get 3 then for the price of 1. Okay, now it's going to take a little longer maybe for those 3 to develop into that same size, but for me, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with taking that multiple perennial and just planting it as is. But I sometimes look, if I want to buy more plants and, if my budget's a little tight, then I'll look for perennials that I can immediately divide. And that's okay too.
How about in shrubs? What should you look for when you're buying a shrub?
Well, of course, check the tag, like we said. But shrubs, and of course, what exactly is a shrub? What's the difference between a shrub and a tree? Well, a tree, naturally has a single trunk, okay? Sometimes it'll have more than one, like a clump birch. Shrubs are multiple branched coming out of the ground. But, the reason, you think, shrub, tree, isn't it kind of self-evident? But there are some things like shrubby trees. For example, chokecherry. Okay. Grows into just a great big massive, is it a shrub, a tree? It's pretty big, but it's got, it's big and bushy. And but generally, when you're looking for shrubs, look for as many branches at the base as it has, because then it'll start filling out. It won't be leggy. You'll have just a nicer shrub. And again, look for shrubs that don't have too many yellowing leaves. Anytime a potted plant has yellowing leaves, usually means that it's maybe lacking a little nutrition. Sometimes that's normal a little bit. And when it is normal in the greenhouses and things, we used to just remove any of the yellowing leaves. Just, if it's normal, then we'd get rid of them so it wouldn't indicate low nutrition. And so that would be the main thing. Look for something that just kind of, has in your gut, it looks like this is a nice one, well-branched, good color on it. And then that's what we would usually select. I might mention, too, when we get into cost savings, the difference in sizes of things. But let's save that we'll talk a little bit later about how we can save some money on garden centers. Yeah, so I'll save the size for later.
And the other thing to consider too when you're buying a shrub is to, again, they may come in the 5-gallon bucket or something like that. They will grow much bigger. So again, just like you were saying earlier about the junipers, look at the tags again, and realize how big they will be, because especially if you're going to plant shrubs as in front of a house to kind of maybe cover up the foundation or something like that, really take all those things into consideration.
Yeah, good point.
Look at the plant tags.
Because probably the most common landscaping mistake is to crowd the plants too close to the house foundation. Because again, they look so small, but really purposely come out farther than what you think from the house foundation when you plant these. Because trust me, I've done this. I planted things too close to the house foundation. 20 years later, it looked like you had crammed everything up. So do come away from the house foundation on these based on that tag for the shrub.
All right, we're going to take another little quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about more things to look for at the garden center. And let's talk about what to look for with trees.
The cold cases you see at the Vault have captivated readers across our region for years. At the Vault podcast, our team of professional reporters takes you further into those stories with new interviews from family members, investigators, and experts. Check out The Vault at inforum.com/The Vault and subscribe to The Vault wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, we're back and we're talking about the things to keep in mind or to know when you go to your garden center to pick up all your new plants to get out into your yard and garden. But let's talk about trees. This can be because a tree will, you're going to have a tree hopefully you're planting a tree for 100 plus years. It can be a little intimidating, and the trees are also quite a bit more than, planting a shrub or perennials.
Trees are intimidating.
Yeah,
so
you're
right.
You really kind of want to make sure that you're making the right thing, making the right decision.
Yeah, because the idea that this is going to be here a long, long time, I want to choose wisely when I do.
And you're also making a statement. You're making a statement that people are going to see that in your yard. If it's a tree that's going to get up above your house, people are going to see it from your backyard. You see into your backyard about that. So let's talk a little bit about what to look for in a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that reminds me when you were describing that, when people look into my backyard, the apple tree that I bought cheap, if people look at that, it's all crooked and the branches are going every which way and I couldn't even prune it back into health. So yeah, your point that people may be seeing these trees, yes, and so not only yourself but others. So yeah, let's choose wisely. So what to choose in a tree? Whether it's an apple tree or a shade type tree, look for a good straight trunk, that doesn't have some sort of a wonky curving out to it, because in time, oftentimes that won't get better. It'll just get more weird. So good straight trunk with a central leader, that's the trunk and a single leader that goes just all the way up. Be cautious and look very carefully if the top of the tree has a Y on it, if instead of one single leader, if it has a Y branch where it has two totally equal branches going up, that's to be avoided at all costs, because if it has that Y at the top, 30 years down the road, that's going to be a spot where when we get a windstorm, it's going to just break apart in the middle. So make sure that you have that single straight leader going all the way up, and then nice branches coming off the side. Well, nice, what's nice branches? Kind of well-spaced branches coming off that main central trunk. And then also take a look at the trunk to make sure that there's no scuffs or scars or a little bit of bark rubbed against, shipping or something. Just make sure that the trunk looks like it doesn't have any injury to it. And the other thing to look for that may seem a little bit odd, but look at the point where that tree trunk goes into the pot, into the soil. You should see a widened out flare, which is natural on a tree, a widened out flare, because that'll kind of tell you what a depth to plant it at. So when you get the tree home and plant it, you should still see that widened flare. If you don't see that widened flare, it might indicate that the tree was planted too deeply in the pot. And when you get it home, you might have to readjust, take away some of that soil. And so, yeah, just kind of be aware of that widened area. And with fruit trees, make sure it's a recommended variety, especially if you're shopping at some of the national chains they might have bought for a large area of the country. And so some of the fruit trees might not be for our zone. if you are kind of wondering about a list of fruit trees well adapted for North Dakota, Minnesota, the upper Midwest, just do an online search.
Yep.
Fruit trees, North Dakota State University. Fruit trees, University of Minnesota. You'll get that nice list of everything that has a track record of growing so very, very nicely.
And with that too, if you are going to get a fruit tree, depending on what you want from that fruit tree, if you want it for its color, that's one thing. If you want it for its fruit, then you have to look and see, do you need a pear, right? Or
do you need, two varieties?
Two varieties
most
so that
of
they
our
can
fruit trees.
pollinate.
You do need the two different named varieties. Could be in the neighbor's yard as well. And these beautiful flowering crab apples, they do act as pollinators for our fruiting apple trees too. And so usually there's plenty of things. I should mention too, okay, if we kind of, I think we've covered the main tips on the trees, but I want to mention the displays of flower bulbs in garden centers. Usually there's a big rack with all kinds of different flower bulbs, and it's important to be sure that the flower bulbs that you buy, for example, gladiolus need to be dug in the fall of the year. They're not a winter hardy perennial. So just kind of be aware of that. Dahlias are another one. In the same bulb type display, you might see hardy lilies. And of course, the hardy lilies are a good perennial that'll come up each year. You might even see peony roots or bleeding heart roots, lily of the valley roots. So when you see a display of all of these, just kind of make a mental note of which are perennials and which you will have to dig up. That's especially true with people kind of learning about gardening. It's not always self-evident that gladiolus can't be left in the ground year-round, but those are all the types of things that we do learn.
How about for new homeowners? We have a colleague here who is just telling us and showing us pictures of his brand new home. He's very excited to get out in his yard, do some things out there. What would you say for a new homeowner? Because again, talk about an intimidating experience.
It is.
You just bought a new home. If you're starting your garden.
And sometimes your budget doesn't always allow you to just immediately the first season just put everything in. Usually that's just not the way. Okay, trees are going to take longer, of course, to grow established. So it's oftentimes best to decide where the trees are going to go and then buy those, get the trees installed. And apple trees are going to take 5 years, maybe 7 years to fruit. So let's get the apple trees bought at the garden center and get those installed. And then, of course, the next thing would be the shrubbery that you want to plant around. Perennial flowers could wait a little bit if you need to. If you want to get the rest of the things, the woody plants kind of installed first, perennials can wait a little bit. If in the meantime you're getting kind of impatient, you want some color and you want some pizzazz in your yard, annual flowers, that's the perfect thing. They're relatively inexpensive. Do pots and planters in the perennial or even in the shrub area that you've planted. It's probably going to look sparse the first year, but put a few pockets of annual flowers in here and there, marigolds, petunias, begonias in the shade, coleus, and that'll make it all look nice. So the first year or two, invest in annual flowers too to make it look good, and then as your budget allows. But do start in with the trees and shrubs, the things that are going to take longer to develop, and then kind of work outward from there. And of course, speaking of limited budget, there are different ways you can kind of economize at the garden center. And I never say, or I never think about it as trying to get plants on the cheap. Instead, if I save a little money here, or I got a little more money to buy those plum trees I'm talking about. I want more plum trees. And so a couple of things that we can do. Shrubs are oftentimes, and trees, sold in different size containers. Okay, for example, if I want a creeping, spreading juniper, and they're oftentimes sold in gallons, a 1-gallon pot, a 5-gallon pot. Okay, a creeping juniper, if I buy a 1-gallon, the smallest size, they're going to grow. The big 5-gallon one costs a great deal more. It gives you a little more instant, but that younger one is going to catch up. Same with trees. It may look like the difference between a 4-foot tree that you buy versus a 6-foot tree. It may look right now that that's quite a dramatic difference, but the price is going to be much different. And the younger one's going to catch up fine. Sometimes younger plants will actually transplant with less shock and eventually take off and overpass. Is that a word? Overpass?
Pass by,
than the highway.
Yeah.
But it'll pass by the one that you planted bigger that takes a little longer to establish.
Well, and especially,
so sometimes smaller plants can immediately grab hold and eventually take off and be bigger.
And that's the other thing to consider too. When you were talking about trees, the difference between buying a 4-foot tree and a 6-foot tree, some trees will grow a foot in a year. And so that's another thing to consider when you're looking at buying a tree. How fast do you want something to grow, a fast growing tree? So yeah, if you can save some money, or if you budget, right, to get something smaller, but that will grow fast, so that maybe this year it won't be exactly as you imagined how you want it to be, but within 3 or 4 years, it will be. Plus, you'll have that extra money to put into something else that will, instead of putting all your money into one big tree out front, split that between a tree, a couple shrubs, and then also some annuals that'll really add that immediate pop.
Yeah, definitely. So all good points. It's got me excited to go to the garden center. And one of the common questions that my wife Mary and I would get in our garden center is from people who bought. Well, the selection is good. They bought maybe kind of at the first half of May, or the selection was really, really good. And because some garden centers can sell out, as the season goes on, maybe you sell out of some of the things, so people would enjoy shopping. But a common question was, okay, I'm not ready to plant these yet. Is it okay to put them in the garage for a while? Because I'm not ready to plant for a couple of weeks. And the answer is no. All of these plants are grown in greenhouses with good light. The shrubs and trees are outside in full sunlight, and they need that light. If we take them home and put them in our dimly lit garage, they're going to languish and go downhill. So even if you're not ready to plant, it's better to have those plants outside. If it's a sunny plant, give it sun. And that will help toughen them in. By the time you are ready to plant, they'll be hardened off or toughened in. Now, maybe don't put them out in a spot that's going to get the full brunt of the wind. Yeah. Because that's hard on them and they'll just keep blowing over. So maybe a little bit of a protected spot. But also in the garden center, many of those, for example, a tree or shrub, in a pot, it might have to be watered every day. After you plant it, not every day. But in a pot, sometimes you would have to water it every day, just like the garden center watered it every day. So don't let them wilt from drying out. And also, if you've got tomato plants, bedding plants, annual plants, perennials, it's fine to leave them in those pots, kind of group them in a little area where they're getting good sunshine, and then make sure you do water them. And because many of those things, like I say, in a garden center, they might be watered in those little packs and pots every day. But you can keep them really indefinitely as long as you watch. And if you're going to keep anything longer than 2 weeks, and I've bought some material and I just haven't been ready to plant, so I just keep watering it. But also, if you're keeping some things such as tomato plants, annual plants, longer than a couple of weeks, they might start running out of fertility in those pots. So then maybe use the water-soluble type, mix it up in a watering can according to the label, and give it some good nutrition so they don't start getting the yellowing that we warned about from a greenhouse.
Yeah. Very important. Exactly. You can stock up and you can get all your plants, but you take care of them before I know for us, we've got our front porch has glass windows, storm windows that are still up now. So we still have that kind of greenhouse effect there, which is very nice. But yeah, really, the only time to put a plant in the garage, I would say, is if a big storm is coming through.
Yeah, exactly. Or if it's going to freeze at night.
If it's going to freeze, right.
then move them on in, and then back out after the danger of frost is past. Have you ever bought anything at a garden center? Because, gosh, this is nice. And then get it home and wonder, where am I going to plant this now?
Oh, yes. So much of the time. Sam will look at me and is like, she'll actually say now, where are we going to plant that? But we still do that. There's plants I will, that's the thing. Like it's
work up an area of the lawn and plant something else.
As they say, kids in a candy store, you're always looking and you find something. And that's a good point, what you just said about working up an area of the lawn. We're going to move some things around this week, and we're going to take an area that is kind of between two gardens, and we're going to make that a garden. We're just going to extend between the two, and we're going to move some stuff around to kind of create more space for more plants, more greenery.
But all this talk, I want to go to a garden center.
I know.
Yeah, it's a beautiful afternoon. Well, it's kind of windy to do the day we're recording this, but now I got the itch. I want to get to a garden center.
There's plenty of time now.
There is. Good gardening season, and a big shout out to our locally owned garden centers and all the garden centers, because what would we do without them? Boy, talk about a service.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I wanted to say too. Going to a garden center, whether you go to a local one or a big box, don't be afraid to ask questions.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, they love it. I mean, they may be busy, but so be respectful, obviously, of people. Try to read the room, as they say. But ask questions, because that's what they're there for.
Yeah. Hey, and you bring up another great point, and that is, okay, no garden center, locally owned or nobody, can stock everything. They can't handle the tens, hundreds of thousands of different types of plants. So if there's a certain plant that you want and you can't find, just ask them. Because maybe if they don't have it this year, they could maybe have it next year. So what garden centers stock is what people ask for and looking. So again, patience. If you can't get it this year, well, maybe next year they can handle it.
Would you do that? Like if people ask, I'm looking for this, or did you ever make special orders for people that even within that year?
Definitely, if asked far enough in advance. Yeah. But definitely, we kept journals of what people were asking for. So if they wanted lots of white cascade petunias and we were sold out too early, we would plant more.
Yeah.
And so definitely let the garden centers know what it is you want, because they can make their growing decisions based on that.
I've held off on this little tip for going to a garden center.
I'm curious. What's that?
And because it's self-serving. My brother's girlfriend goes to a big plant sale down in St. Paul every year, and she says it's quite a thing. It can be really busy. It can be really kind of overwhelming. She said she kind of pre-games by listening to this podcast. She says that by listening to Don's calming voice helps put her in the mood, helps put her in the zone. So if you need help, listen to this podcast before you go to the garden center, on the drive there, in the parking lot, go in, have a good time.
Awesome. Yes. And everyone enjoy the week and enjoy shopping in the garden center. I know I will.